James Mitchell. He's the author of Enhanced Interrogation. James, the thing that is striking so many people about this cold-blooded attack, or cold calculation, as the Prime Minister said this morning, is that they clearly targeted kids. Why would they target kids?
Well, one of the things that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind of 9/11, told me was that kids were one of those weapons that Allah had provided so that Al-Qaeda could discourage and punish those people who are resisting the imposition of true Islam. He said that kids are legitimate targets because not only do they provide the parents with a reason to continue fighting because they want a better future than is usually found inside of Sharia, right? But also, if you allow your enemy's children to live, it restocks the ranks of the infidel that you're trying to eliminate. We've seen that historically with all kinds of barbaric folks go in and kill the young males, and so we shouldn't be surprised to see that.
That's one of the craziest things I've ever heard.
It's crazy. You and I don't think that way. We tend to see things through the eyes of the West, right? Earlier I said I'm not surprised that they would target children, because when I look at that concert, I see young people enjoying themselves. I see young people having a good time. I see young people excited about living their lives. When an Islamist looks at that concert, they see something entirely different. They see something that they view as obscene, something they view as an insult to Islam. And so in their minds, they don't see it as cowardice. They don't see it as a horrific act. They see it as something that they can do to create enough horror and enough terror that be able to intimidate those people who would oppose them.
That shows you how sick they are, that they could attack children. And you've looked in the eyes of many of these terrorists, the worst of the worst. This guy who's arrested, this 23-year-old, what are they doing right now? How are they interrogating him or her?
Well, first I think they're trying to figure out whether or not he was actually involved. My guess would be if he's been arrested under some sort of special dispensation that allows them to do it, they're going to be looking at his emails, they're going to be looking at his tweets, they're going to be looking at his social media, they're going to be looking at his contacts, and they're going to see if there's any link between him and whatever support network that this bomber had. It seems. One of the things that I used to be a bomb squad guy, and I was on in explosive disposal, and I have seen Al-Qaeda's bombs. And one of the things that's maybe not so clear to your viewers is that bombers have signatures, and they can tell from the remnants of what they picked up whether or not those are military explosives, whether or not they were made locally, and from the way that the thing is wired, they can figure out who probably either the teacher or the master bomb maker was, or whether it's something he cobbled together by himself. So I'm confident. The Brits are brilliant at this. Our problem, and I would agree with Judge Nataliano, is that we're playing catch-up. You know, we treat this like a law enforcement issue instead of being proactive. It has been one of my chief concerns all along. In law enforcement, a crime has already happened. In the United States, we have civil rights, which I applaud and don't want to see removed, but those civil rights make it very difficult to act preemptively to stop these kinds of attacks.
And that's why the President of the United States, who clearly is showing the Muslim world he is not anti-Muslim, was saying if most of the terrorists are coming from these nations who can't identify who's coming here, at least there's got to be a pause to protect the American people. It seems almost logical. Now, you know most of the hijackers are from Saudi Arabia. Do you believe we saw a different Saudi mindset 2 days ago?
I do. I have mixed feelings about the Saudis. I don't like that they export Wahhabism. On the other hand, they have been very good allies in the fight against Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And the reason for that, of course, I think, is their own interests. You know, they are apostates. And the terrorists who want to impose Sharia law would like to kill them and establish a caliphate. So it's in their best interest. And oh, by the way, it's in the best interest of every other leader in the Middle East to get on board, because they're all seen as apostates too. One of the things that that pleases me about what President Trump did is he's gotten the leaders maybe a little bit more on board. But it's not the leaders. They're necessary but not sufficient. It's the clerics, it's the scholars, it's the religious leaders, it's the people who have the optional Friday afternoon lectures in these radical mosques that have to be brought on board. If we just change the leaders' minds and we don't get rid of those scholars or change what the scholars are saying, then we're not really going to do anything.
And that's an important point. You said scholars. When you talk to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, you're talking about a guy who went to college. When you talk about Zawahiri, the head of Al-Qaeda, you're talking about a guy that became a doctor. So it's a mindset. It's not ignorance. It's their choice to be terrorists. An intellectual choice, which I find more challenging.
Well, you know, one of the things that I've run into around the country when I've spoken with folks is they often say, well, if they just understood us better. Oh, no. They understand us. They reject it. Yeah. That's the difference. It's not that they don't know how we live. It's that the way that they think that the way we live is an obscenity that needs to be curtailed, and that freedom and democracy cannot coexist with true Sharia. And one of the things that I haven't seen mentioned on your program this morning is the proximity to this terror attack with the British elections. You know, it's not unusual for these terror organizations to try to influence elections by having an attack just before it. And what often happens is those people that they have already intimidated turn out in droves and vote for the person who's likely to be more passive in their attempt to control the spread of Sharia.
Sure. James, a moment ago you mentioned the President of the United States, President Trump. He's going to be speaking momentarily at the Israel Museum, and we're going to take folks there. As you can see, everybody's ready, and another minute or two. Meanwhile, going back to what happened last night in Manchester, there's a story out today that, and Brian brought this up, 3,500 suspected terrorists in Great Britain. You know, they're doing their best, God bless them, to try to keep them under surveillance. But I think the big question today is going to be, now that they know who this guy apparently was he on the list? Were they keeping eyeballs on this guy? And if not all the time, why not?
Well, it's a problem. The problem is that, and I don't want to sound like some sort of thug, but the problem is we have civil rights that allow them to operate in the open for the most part until they commit a crime. Let me share one thing with you. As you know, I'm being sued by 3 terrorists. Their ACLU lawyers will not even stipulate that 9/11 happened. With that kind of approach to this, it's very difficult to get into preemptively stopping these kinds of attacks, because they have people who protect them under the guise of protecting the civil rights.
What do you think, by the way, they're suing you because you're an anti-terrorism, and they would also, these lawyers, sneak in pictures to their terrorist buddies, their terrorist clients, of you and others that have and with your addresses, providing information on you should they get out, or should an operative want to target you.
Is it worth it then?
Well, they did do that. They did that. They snuck them into to the terrorists at Guantanamo, but it wasn't the ACLU lawyers. It was the lawyers that were down at Guantanamo. Different set of lawyers, same mindset.
Is it worth it then? Why would you ever want to do this as a career? Seems so scary.
To save lives.
Wow.
You know, I come from a background where people are willing to set aside their own safety to protect other people. That's what we are. And America needs patriots who are willing to do that. What they should do is stand behind those who are doing it. And they should stand behind those responders in London, and I mean in England, and especially in Manchester. They need to stand behind them rather than vilifying them.
Yeah. After 9/11 and knowing what happened in Boston and seeing this, we thank you for that. You talked about the timing in this, and Theresa May, they have decided to think we lost you.
I think we just lost him.
Well, he was talking about the timing. What's interesting is they did decide to extend the election. The election was supposed to be on June 8th, and she is, from what I'm reading about her, she is tighter on security than the guy that she's running against. We're waiting.